The currency has become practically worthless with 1.42 million reals to a dollar. The basic grievance is economic mismanagement and corruption, endemic corruption, structural inefficiencies that have brought Iran to where it is today. This cycle of rioting and protests that we have seen is not a purely Gen Z phenomenon since last week. So these cycle of protests are not a new phenomenon. It has built up over 2.5 decades.
Burzin, thank you very much for speaking to ANI. First of all, I'll ask you, how do you look at the ongoing protests in Iran as it has been around a week? How significant has the dramatic fall of the Iranian rial been in catalyzing the nationwide unrest? And would you also characterize this movement primarily as economic protest that have spilled into political dissent, or fundamentally political uprising?
The currency has become practically worthless with 1.42 million reals to a dollar. It has completely gone through the floor, which has never happened since 40 plus years of the revolution in January 1979. Inflation today stands at 42.2%. Iran has 12% of the world's proven oil reserves and is a major gas exporting economy, both oil and gas. But we've seen rationing of petrol and gas in the last couple of years. Paradoxically, that has to be pointed out. And a long-standing drought, not to mention sanctions that have made an impact. But putting all that aside, the basic grievance is economic mismanagement and corruption, endemic corruption, structural inefficiencies that have brought Iran to where it is today. It has nothing to do with sanctions, entirely speaking, or with the 12-day war with Israel, as others would have us believe. That is a patent misperception. It is completely domestic, both the discontent economically but also politically, in that the regime is repressive and stifling and doesn't think twice about shooting its own population in cold blood. That's the only response Iranians have. You may say it's a quasi-authoritarian system and that elections are held, but they are not genuine, free and fair elections and have not been so since 1979. And this cycle of rioting and protests that we have seen is not a purely Gen Z phenomenon since last week, but involved the traditional Shia pious middle class, the bazaar elements, who have otherwise bolstered the clerisy and have always been almost hand in glove with them since 1979 in running the place for financing and patronage networks. So it was the bazaar which closed down on Sunday last in the cell phone market area, and then, of course, shops rapidly across the region and cities. The Gen Z protests, as one keeps talking about the youth protests for social liberties and freedoms, that was ongoing in any case since Mahsa Amini's death in 2022, but also it goes back to beyond the Green Revolution of 2009 and to the first protests by university-going students in July 1999. So these cycle of protests are not a new phenomenon. It has built up over 2.5 decades.
Right. And Burzin, how would you rather interpret President Trump's declaration that the US is locked and loaded to intervene if Iran violently suppresses protests? And Iran has also warned that US interference could destabilize the region and threaten American interests.
President Trump's remarks offer moral support to those who feel the world has forgotten them. It has to be seen in such light. People may want to impulsively dismiss what he says as aggravating a situation or muddying the waters as Iranians struggle to locate their own agency and find their destiny. Though there are those who would want to read it that way, but you have to ask yourself, how is it that not a single Western leader, not a single Afro-Asian leader feels it worth their while to speak for the Iranian population? We often speak for protests in Hong Kong or in Tibet or actually practically anywhere in the world. But how is it that everyone feels the urge to be guarded and not speak about Iran. It is no good saying that this is merely an internal matter and that it's not for us to discuss and wade in on the criticism as these are just local insurrectionists or that they are just Zionist operatives or supported from outside as foreign destabilizing agents. Nothing could be further from the truth. It is a perfectly popular grassroots movement genuinely invested in grievances which are palpable and patent in a regime that is utterly unrepresentative and has stifled Iranians over 40 plus years. So Mr. Trump's remarks maybe seemed rash at first sight, but they do offer some moral support and psychological succor to those who are bereaved inside Iran, who are facing the full wrath of a sophisticated machinery and an intelligence service and have nothing to fend for themselves as they go out unarmed in these protests. They have no arms. They're not being armed or funded by anybody at all. So that's a blatant lie being put out in certain quarters of the media that they are just insurrectionists or rebels being put out by the US or by Israel or other external elements.
Mhm. Just putting one more question, the last question. Could this uprising represent the most serious challenge to the Islamic Republic since 2022? And what are the key factors that could determine its trajectory? The last one, as you mentioned, also were due to Masa Amini's death.
It is more serious than the others. For example, I would point out that only in the last 24 hours, the Central Bank of Iran has started issuing orders across the country from Tehran to prepare for financial contingencies. It has also asked for people to secure, ask banking agencies across the country, local banks, to secure and manage financial data and to activate crisis parallel pay systems, for example. Then we also hear the Ministry of Defense Export Center has been desperate to procure cryptocurrency in order to bypass Western financial sanctions under which they are by selling defense equipment to anyone and everyone. There are blatantly tenders put out on the Ministry of Defense website if one were to see. And it's quite dangerous when you see that the Iran government or regime is willing to sell any and everything to practically not just any countries, but even terrorists, which shows you how desperate they are to garner cryptocurrency. These are two salient examples that have unfolded in the last week that I'm pointing out. So the question is that it is very serious, and it's again not just a protest of popular youthful discontent of the unemployed or those who have no prospects. It involves all strata of Iranian society, including the middle classes, including the technocrats, and including who are pious Muslim Shia elements who have hitherto never been part of such protests, but also feel that the government and the regime is utterly discredited. So it is a national movement and a groundswell in more ways than one.